Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Women of Golf this July 29th, 2014. Got a great show. I guess a welcome back. We were off the air last week. I had to take a little vacation break, and Cindy had some things going on, so we took a little bit break. But we're back this week with another great segment on Own Your Game. We're going to get to that in just a minute here. But first, let me bring on my partner, if you will, LPGA professional Cindy Miller. Cindy, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Ted. Welcome back to you. It's great to be back.
Yeah. We were just talking, just off air just a second or two ago, and I was mentioning about I went down to Miami. My girlfriend Caroline went down to Miami for a few days and had a really great time. We stayed in the Coral Gables area, and I was trying to explain to Cindy where we were and some of the things, and I realized, as she pointed out to me, or reminded me rather, that she attended the University of Miami, so she's quite familiar with the area, and I forgot who I was talking to. But we had a great time, a lot of fun. Well, hey, I'm getting old. What can I say? I'm having a senior moment today. But had a great time down there, and if you've never been to Miami, lots of great golf in the area, as I'm sure Cindy would attest to, and just a lot of great beach and a lot of interesting nightlife and stuff like that. So if you haven't had a chance to go and visit Miami, by all means, make that one of your vacation stops, maybe before the end of the year if you have an opportunity, or maybe plan it for next year. But definitely want to go down. I had lots of fun and didn't make it down. We were going to go down one day actually to Key West. And the day we were going to go down, a big storm started brewing up, and we just decided not to. It's I think about 3 hours, if I'm not mistaken, from Miami. But we just decided we would hold off and sort of hang tight. But had a great time, anyways. But glad to be back here with all of you, and we appreciate you tuning in each and every week. And let me just remind everybody before we get started. Of course, we are live every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time here on blogtalkradio.com. And we look forward to having you join us here. And you're certainly welcome to call into the show if you'd like. You can reach us here at area code 347-945-5855. Or you can email questions or comments into the program at womenofgolf@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can also reach Cindy Miller personally at cindy@cindymillergolf.com if you want to get some information about some of the great things that Cindy does, both on tour and in her teaching as well. So you can certainly contact Cindy Miller there. As I mentioned, we're going to continue on. We've still got a few more segments, if you will, on a series that Cindy brought to the program, Own Your Game. And today we're going to cover two. We didn't have a guest for this morning, so we're going to cover two of them, part 10 and 11, and that's self-assured and self-sufficient. So Cindy, let's jump right in. Let's start with the first part, self-assured. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, the definition of self-assured is your ability to maintain confidence in yourself no matter how well you're playing on a given day. Because the nature of golf is so hard to be confident, and it's impossible to play great the whole time you're out there. So I call it bipolar golf. I'm good and bad, I'm good and bad, I'm good and bad, I'm good and bad. And so the ability to stay even-keeled, I guess you could say, and assured that I'm not what I shoot. My husband and I both played on the LPGA and the PGA Tour, and we had this thing of, I am not what I shoot. So some days you're 68 and some days you're an 80, and you don't want your self-esteem to be indicative of what you shot. It's very hard to be confident and almost virtually impossible to maintain perfect skill, or peak performance for long periods of time. The levels of play can fluctuate wildly, needless to say, during a single round. And if your self-assurance is low, confidence can fluctuate just as wildly, quickly, taking you out of the zone and into Never Never Land.
Yep.
and the ability to bounce back from Never Never Land.
Yeah, and we've all experienced that too at some point, whether you're playing competitively or just, with your group foursome on the weekends. Sometimes you're in that moment, and the next minute, everything's sort of going haywire. So it's a very common thing, and certainly at the professional level, you see it from time to time as well.
Absolutely, and our son happened to be in the Porter Cup last week, and he hasn't played in a Porter Cup. He had turned pro and played on the mini tours for 3 years, and then got his amateur status back, and then had to sit out a year, and, for many, many reasons, starting a new job, all this other stuff. He hadn't played in the Porter Cup since 2008, and he was invited this year. And for the first round, he shot 73. Second round, he shoots 67. And he called me, he texted me after the second round and said, 67. And I went, wow, awesome. And then when we talked on the phone that night, he said to me, I got it to 3 under, and the little voice said to me, get it in at 3 under. And then the other little voice said, no, 30 every hole in. He said, so I was very aware that Protect started to show up, and I needed to stay in pursuit. So, he said basically he didn't make any putts other than like 1 4-footer for birdie because the par 5s were short and they were reachable that day. So it's funny how you can, play so good and play so bad. That just happens to be, an example that I witnessed this weekend,
Right. And do you think sometimes, Cindy, let me ask you real quick, and let me just jump in here. Do you think sometimes that because obviously when you're out there playing, especially at a highly competitive level like that, you're obviously a lot of internal dialogue is going on, in your mind and so forth, and you're, essentially you're talking to yourself. Do you think sometimes you talk yourself out of things? Things might be sort of in that zone, as you said, and then suddenly, you start, the self-doubt sort of creeps in and some of these things. Do you think that happens a lot more than maybe people realize on the outside?
I think it does, and I'm not sure that people are aware of it, and hence that's why I'm bringing this to you. This comes from the Golf Psych program, of which this is my personal Golf Psych assessment that I'm sharing with you. And why would I share with you my Golf Psych? Because I am the biggest wacko in the world, and I'm willing to share and become a living laboratory of the lessons that you need to learn to be able to compete at a high level. And that high level might be your league, it might be your club championship, it might be the U.S. Amateur, or it might be the U.S. Open. Right. It's all relative to who the person is, but absolutely, again, why do we do what we do? No one tries to miss it on purpose. So if we can shed some light here on what might be going on in your thought control and your mind management, then maybe we can help somebody save a couple of shots and play a little better and not be so frustrated, because we all feel the pain. This is a common bond here. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, too, just let me add a quick note, too. I think a lot of people put too much emphasis, and certainly we're not trying to take away. You obviously have to have a certain physical ability as well to play good. I mean, you obviously have to be hitting the ball well and so forth. But I think the average, especially the amateur golfer out there, spends too much time focusing on the physical part of their game and not enough on the mental side of the game. And I think that's an area that, as you've mentioned many times here throughout the series, is an area that's vastly overlooked, especially in the amateur level.
Absolutely. And, the control tower is what's telling you what to do. And you have to be very, very aware of what's going on in your head. So to continue with this, it says if you have low self-assurance, you're likely to be very hard on yourself and prone to feel guilty for a wide variety of things. This leads to negative self-talk, which is what you just mentioned, negative imagery. You might see the bunker or the water or the out of bounds instead of the wide fairway. and self-doubt on the golf course, which can make it virtually impossible for you to be competitive. So if you're not aware of what's going on in your mind and your thoughts, you can slip into Never Never Land really quickly. So low self-esteem can even subconsciously leave you feeling like you don't deserve to play well. Strong self-esteem enables you to develop and retain confidence vital to peak performance. Self-esteem is developed over a lifetime, and it's never too late to make it stronger. Typically, champion golfers score 3 to 4 in this area. So, again, where this came from is Deborah Graham got her PhD doing research on the LPGA Tour to find out what makes great champions, and she came up with these 8 traits. And so that's what we're going over. And so when this says champions golfers score 3 to 4 in this area, this is real tour players.
Right.
Yeah. So strong self-assurance helps champions survive the ups and downs of golf, because we all know there's ups and downs. And I think sometimes amateurs aren't aware of that. They think that champion golfers don't have any downs.
I agree with that. That's what I was kind of alluding to earlier is, I think the average, especially the high handicappers out there, what they see on TV is everything sort of edited out, and, they might see a bad shot here and there, but they're obviously not in the golfer's mind. We might have tournaments where golfers, especially some of the fun tournaments where they get mic'd, and you'll hear the players making comments and things like that. But it would be interesting if there was a way that we could kind of get inside the golfer's, the champion's mind and really hear what's going on during a round. I think that would be very interesting.
Yes, it would. Absolutely, definitely. And I think
would you like to volunteer, Cindy?
No. Oh my gosh, it would be very entertaining. We could do a reality show on that.
But really, think about that though. Seriously, I mean, all kidding aside, but think about that. I mean, could you imagine really what a door that would open up for the average person to understand really what? And it's very hard to explain, for a tour player to get out there and they'll talk about certain things, their process, their pre-shot routine. But it's very difficult for them to sort of explain mentally what's going on during a round of golf. They'll try, but it's very difficult because it happens so fast. And a lot of times, as you said earlier, they don't always realize that it's going on.
Well, I can tell you that this has been something that I've been pursuing my whole life, is to try to get better at this game. And so when I decided it was time for me to try to play on the Legends Tour, I had to be willing to look in the mirror to see what might be wrong with me. Hence, this is why you have this program being, with this Own Your Game program on the radio show, because I'm willing to share what I went through myself. Many have issues and struggles with this. And it's amazing how we all do different things. I know I was promoting, we're going to have an assessment here in a couple of weeks. I'm just putting the final touches on the opportunity to take an online assessment, disc sport compass, to find out where people sit. So if our listeners are interested, they'll be able to do that in a couple of weeks. But our son, again, I use him as an example because he's my kid, and he played college golf, and he tried to play on the tour, and he is so different when he gets over a shot. He will see the height of the ball. He visualizes the height of the ball and creates shots. And when I'm with him and we're playing, I was like, what? You do what? I never even thought of doing that. That's not in my wheelhouse at all, ever.
Right.
So what you're saying, I wish we could be inside their head. Absolutely. We have a program that we do called Own Your Game, and we just did it in Washington. We're going to do another Own Your Game event in Rochester on September 7th at Bridgemont Country Club. But one of our slides in the deck is a picture of an island green with a bunker and a couple trees and it's par 3, and the caption says, "What do you see?" And my husband Alan, who we've had on the program, who played on the PGA Tour for 15 years, was teaching Nike Junior Golf Camps, and he would ask all the kids, what do you see? And, so I see the water, I see the bunker, I see no place to hit the ball. And then Dr. Bob Winters, who was a PhD, and he's one of the PhD professors for the David Ledbetter Academy now, he said, Alan,
right.
What do you see? He said, I see long left. So you have to train your eye and your mind to go and avoid stupid. So in our pre-game, planning a shot process, I have a card that I give to my students. How do you plan and prepare to hit a shot? And, the first thing you're going to do is get the yardage, and then you're going to look at the lie, and then you're going to check the wind, and then you're going to avoid stupid. And what that means is look up and see where stupid would hit the ball, and then turn your eye the other way.
That really brings a great point, Cindy. That analogy that you just talked about with Alan and with your Own Your Game series. That's really the difference between a better player and some of the higher handicap or amateur players is they don't see long left when they're looking at the shot or whatever.
He saw long left because that was the safest place on the green. That there was no water, there was no bunker. He may have had a 40-foot putt, but it was a stress-free shot. So if you can train yourself, the first step in this is to become aware. And it's funny because as I read through this program that we're bringing, I'm lucky enough to be able to be a participant in the Legends Open Championship in a couple weeks at French Lick Resort. The French Lick, the Donald Ross course, happens to be one of the hardest golf courses I've ever played in my life. And last year, when you don't have confidence in your golf swing, I played 54 holes with clenched butt cheeks, because it was like, don't hit it there, don't hit it there, don't hit it there, And so it's almost like I'm looking forward to challenging myself this year to say, look, you can only control what you do with the club. Choose your shot, make a decision, commit to the decision, and let her rip. So, our listeners need to be very aware that no matter how good you are, these are lessons we all need to learn. And we're all in the same.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, as I was starting to say, that's something that I think that, a lot of the amateur golfers really need to understand. And it's not that the professionals, let's just clarify it. It's not that the professionals or the better players don't know that there is trouble around, but because they're not focusing on it, it's almost as though it isn't there. I mean, realistically, we know it's there, but they're so focused on where the ball needs to go and where it needs to be positioned, and based on their shot abilities, they know where the safe play is and where they need to go, any specific shot. So they're sort of, blocking, if you will, out that trouble. They know it's there, but they're not focusing on it, where the amateur golfer tends to do the opposite. They're looking at all the trouble and not really focusing on where they need to get the ball for that next shot, and that's why so many of them get into trouble.
Absolutely correct. And the other part of that is, do they have the skill set to be able to hit the shot where they want it to go? So we're assuming that you can hit a shot avoiding the trouble. And even I've told people, if you're wanting to score better and you have issues with your driver, you have the guts to play 18 holes without your driver. And they look at me like I've got four eyes. And I said, well, if your mission is to score better and your driver is your trouble, avoid your driver. Don't fight with it. Oh, I never even thought of that. What will everybody say? I go, well, do you really care? If you were standing on the 18th hole of the Masters and you had to make 5, which is a bogey, would you pull out your driver and hit an OB? Or would you use a 5-iron in the middle of the fairway and then another 5-iron and a pitching wedge on the green? Let's be realistic. So they have to have the skill set, and they have to have the awareness that some of their actions and their thoughts might be sabotaging their play.
Right, exactly.
So again, I've got a student coming in today that I've never met, and a friend emailed me and said, I have a kid that needs mental help. So the kid calls me and he goes, I want to qualify for the golf team at college. And I said, okay, is the coach going to let you? Yes. What does the team shoot? Well, they're not that good. I go, well, what do they shoot? High 70s. Okay, what do you shoot? I shoot 74, 75 every time I play. How many fairways and greens do you hit? Oh, I hit about 10 fairways and 10 greens. So, okay, well, if you're shooting 74 and you're only hitting 10 greens, you've got a magical short game. So I said, I'm not sure that you need mental help. You probably need to hit the ball in the fairway. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm saying is when someone comes in or our listeners are trying to figure out what's wrong with their games, they need to be able to assess the numbers to say, all right, what is it that I want? Why am I here? And let's find the symptoms before we diagnose the problem.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. A great point. And so many, it can't emphasize enough. And something, too, that you talked about several weeks back, to help from the physical part of the game is it's important to know what your go-to shot is as well. That it becomes so important in a round. If you're struggling with a certain part of your game, but you know that you hit it, maybe a high fade is your go-to and comfortable shot, or a draw, or whatever the case may be, you may have to pull that out of your bag a little more often throughout the round to get yourself in keeping it in play. And a lot of people don't really know what that go-to shot is. So that from the physical side, that's important as well, is you need to have a shot that you can count on, as you've indicated many times, at least 50% of the time that you know you're going to be able to get it where you need it to go.
Absolutely. So back to the champions and self-assured. They seldom judge their worth as a person by the quality of their play. So a bad round will seldom ruin their day. This doesn't mean they're satisfied with mediocre performance, but their opinion of themselves doesn't change because of their score, which so many kids, that we teach, they have pushy parents. Their body language is their head down, they're sulking, they feel like they're worthless, and that's not the case, and that's why I have to sometimes fire parents and help the kids, because it's like you've got to stop. Quit putting so much pressure on your child, because they are not what they shoot. And your high confidence score indicates you're capable of the same. Consider the following recommendations. Can help maintain your personal confidence and to foster your performance confidence. So, First recommendation is personal balance. Work to maintain your strong level of self-assurance by keeping golf in proper perspective. It is a game. It should not become so central to your life that other areas are neglected. Maintain quality time for other important areas of your life, including family, personal relationships, and friends. So, and I think that all starts with setting realistic goals and expectations. If somebody wants to play college golf, do you want to always have to try to qualify to be the top 5, or do you want to comfortably always be able to be in the top 5 so that you can play in all the tournaments, or do you just want to be on the team and don't care whether you play in a tournament? And when you set your goals, then needless to say, you're going to have to back that up with an investment in time and working on your game and possibly money to pay for lessons to get better.
Yeah, you have balance is so important in life, and I think sometimes, and I'll give you a perfect example. When Tiger first came out on the tour, of course, Tiger was a little bit different than most that you would see coming out on tour. He had a different work ethic and a different upbringing, and he was very diligent in his work to get to where he wanted to be. And one of the things that I remember hearing about a lot in the media was that everybody was sort of getting their kids corralled out to the golf course to be the next Tiger Woods. Well, Tiger is a different person than you and then I and the next person. And what might be good for Tiger might not necessarily be good for somebody else. And it might have worked for him. And parents have to be careful of that. You know, the kid may not have the ability to be a Tiger Woods or an Annika Sorenstam or some of the other top players that have been out there. They may not have that same drive and determination to do that. That doesn't mean they're not going to be a good player, perhaps, but you have to be careful that you don't push them so hard that they're not having that personal balance, that they're not getting enough, you know, other things in their life, that they're so focused on their game in order to be the top person that they're overlooking other areas of their life.
And because if they do get out of balance, then there's going to be issues, personal issues, trouble, and you got to be aware of that. You want a well-rounded child, no matter what.
Yep.
Golf is not the end all.
Exactly.
The second recommendation here is beware of overconfidence, false perception of yourself. You know, they can lead you into competitive competition with an unrealistic view of your abilities. If so, you may react to failures with defensiveness, excuses, and the tendency to project blame on other people or factors. Projecting blame can prevent you from learning your own mistakes. So, you know, I'm going to play in this big tournament that's a major championship on our Legends Tour. That's a $450,000 purse that only the top 48 best women players in the world over the age of 45 get to play in. So, needless to say, I'm thrilled that I'm in the tournament and I'm in the field, and we're gonna do one of our shows right from the site and get some players on in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. It should be great. But
that'll be.
The point being, you know, the realistic view is, okay, Cindy, you're 58 years old. There's people 45 playing. It's just, you know, Laura Davies, Julie Inkster might even be playing. Patty Sheehan, Jen Stevenson, Lori Rinker, you know, Lori Kane, who won last year, who still plays on the LPGA Tour. So you have to stop and say, okay, what are your expectations for this? And I used to want to win, and I still want to win, but, you know, it's like, okay, really? You know, let's look in the mirror, sweetie. Lori Davies hits it 50 yards past you. All par fives are par fours for her. Oh, okay, you got a point. You know, so it's like, Cindy, be realistic here. Just go play the best you can play. Have a process goal that I'm going to do my pre-shot routine on every shot. I'm going to commit to good decisions, and then the ball goes where it goes. I'd like to be in the top 20. You know, that would be good for me.
Yeah.
I'd like to get Cynthia.
Yeah. Well, and it raises really, you know, the point that all golfers need to understand is it doesn't matter who you're playing against or what the situation is. You have to play your game, and that's why you need to own your game. You can't play somebody else's game because they're going to play it differently than what you might. They might have a different approach, different thought process. You know, there might be certain similar commonalities, you know, with every golfer. But at the same time, everybody is unique, and we're all different from one another, and that's what makes it interesting. Because somebody might have a more aggressive style of play, and somebody might have a more conservative, and somebody might be somewhere between. So you really need to. That's great advice that you just gave, because you know, even though you're playing against somebody that you know potentially is going to hit it 50 yards past you on every hole, you're not going to let that consume you. You're going to stick to your routine and what you know works for Cindy.
Absolutely, the part from the hair, and the second part of the where overconfidence, unrealistic goal setting, an extremely high level of confidence can inspire you towards visions of greatness. I might think I'm amazing. A problem you may encounter is setting and working on short-term steps towards these long-term goals. Lofty visions may render your short-term goals, if you have them, boring. It will help you to break any goal down to practical daily steps. Organize it in a realistic timetable that is written in detail on a calendar and a player. Seek help if needed. So I went and played Sunday afternoon by myself. I played 2 balls, and it was so nice and quiet out there at the golf course. And I said, all right, let's try to see who beats who, Titleist 5 or Titleist 6. and focus on your right brain setup. Feel what you're doing. Imagine the shot. Keep your tempo smooth. And so I get more out of playing 9 holes with 2 balls by myself than I ever do playing with other people, because it's a distraction to me.
Yeah.
The third
exactly.
part of this is positive self-talk. You can consider your high level of confidence a secret weapon for competitive golf. Be certain to maximize it with positive self-talk on the course, coaching yourself as you would a friend. So again, it helps me to watch these kids play in the Porter Cup, to listen to my son and his trials and tribulations. He just qualified for the USGA Mid-Amateur the other day before the Porter Cup. So he's riding a high right now. But he's also very aware of what he needs to be able to do because he really wants to play well at the Mid-Am. So it's many short-term goals leading up to the tournament. So for me, I've got this big tournament in a couple weeks. What's my process? Are you able to shift states and change thoughts and corral them when you need to? And it's not easy. Golf's 4 hours in 3 or 4 days of a tournament. It's hard.
It's a lot to maintain that level. It's hard enough for most people to maintain that level for just one day, let alone for 3 or 4 days, depending on what tournaments they're playing in. But it's a lot to stay focused, and this is why certainly the physical part needs to be. You need to keep yourself healthy, and you need to eat properly. Nutrition and things like that is important to give you the physical stamina, but also you need to have the mental stamina as well, in many ways more so. And, one of the best, players of really all time on the men's side, of course, was Jack Nicklaus. Now, this is not a criticism to Jack, but, Jack certainly wasn't, as physically fit as, say, Tiger Woods is in his day, but he had a very strong mental side, and that's not to say that Jack wasn't in good shape in his younger days, but certainly not to the degree that the younger players are coming up now. I mean, fitness is a big thing, but players have to understand, and people have to understand, that the mental side is so, in my opinion, much more important than the physical side. The physical side, you can get away with certain things, but the mental side, if you have a breakdown, during a round or some point through the day, it can make or break that particular round very easily.
Absolutely. So our next trait of great champions is being self-sufficient. And defining self-sufficiency is your ability to not only make your own decisions, preference for doing so. Many professional golfers feel they make more decisions in one day than most people make in a week. So the poor decision maker, a particularly tough course with rapidly changing conditions, can be torturous. So, that's where do we hit from here? And again, that's why this French Lick course, the Donald Ross course at French Lick, is so demanding, because you really have to play pinpoint target golf. If you miss a shot in the wrong place because you made a bad decision, you're going to pay dearly. So those are more prone to be followers have a difficult time playing to the level of their physical skill. They too often, as other players, ask other players, what club they use. What'd you hit from here? What should I do here? They have a hard time making the decision. Or they hire caddies who will willingly make most of the decisions for them. And it's funny that in reading this over again, I was like, oh, wow, absolutely true. I hate having a caddy trying to tell me what to do. That was one of my issues on tour. I would have somebody, I think you should. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't care. And again, that would go back to your personality, which, again, in a week or two, this assessment's going to be ready to roll. I am a high D personality, very driven, and want to make my own decisions and be in control. My favorite word is control. So my weakness is my favorite word is control. So I have to be aware that I need a little bit of balance to say, oh, why don't you stop for a second and inspect all the options? Oh, I never even thought of that. Okay. So balance is key to all of this, but far too often people with less self-sufficiency will stand over the ball uncommitted to their club or their shot, and then they're quick to blame caddies for their errant play. So it's kind of like, okay, you got to own your game. As most of you already know, it's far better to be committed to the wrong club than uncommitted to the right club. Commitment becomes far more difficult when the decision is not yours. So if you're not absolutely positive, don't get ready to hit the shot because you're standing over it, hearing, warning, this is wrong, oh, you're not going to swing right.
Yeah, and a lot of players do that. That self-doubt sort of creeps in their mind, and they're unsure of it, and more often than not, has a poor result. And afterwards, just think, well, I should have done this or I should have done that. Well, it's easy to go back and assess it later on, but you need to go with what you're confident and what you're committed to at that particular time. And even if it ends up being the wrong thing, at least you have that confidence inside and are able to make that commitment and feel good about the commitment you made. And it's not always going to have a great result, but more often than not it might. And, you have to make sure that you understand that, and a lot of players certainly don't, especially at the amateur level. What about champions?
They scored between a 7 and 8 on this scale out of 10, with number 1 being very group-oriented, probably almost needing a committee to help you play golf, and with 10 being very self-sufficient. So a lot of times for our beginner group lessons, what we do is we do a group playing lesson, and we do a scramble. And we do the scramble together so that we can all decide what best shot to play from certain situations. And this helps the beginner realize, wow, I had no idea all the things I had to take into account before I make a clear decision. So that would be a great opportunity for a beginner golfer to learn how to make decisions. The higher your score on the scale of 1 to 10, the more you prefer to make your own decisions with minimal input from others. The higher the score towards 10 could make you a little bit difficult to coach, but to your advantage, you'll generally resist taking in too much advice regarding the development of your game from too many sources. Which is funny because, how many people go to the driving range and have committee members trying to tell them how to swing when they never even ask for advice? I've already gone through that. A very self-sufficient athlete usually prefers individual sports over team sports unless they offer you a position that requires making your own decisions. Golf demands above-average decision-making skills and the ability to commit to those decisions. Traits that most often interfere with self-sufficiency are high arousal, low self-confidence, inability to detach or wide focus, and emotional stability. So if you've got too many things going on in your head, and you just made a double somewhere, or you just hit one OB, you kind of got to regroup and say, okay, wait. My focus is way too wide. I'm having a cluster in my head, and I need to stop. And then narrow that focus in and shift states and focus on the task at hand. So it really takes a lot of mental workout, if you will. Don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's really what, what we're, sitting there are talking about with this series is, the more you can work on your mental skills and develop that area of your game, the better the player you're going to become. Because the physical side, believe it or not, and I know some people might disagree with this, the physical side is actually easy to fix. The club face, depending on its position, is going to have a certain result. And once you understand that, you can correct that. But if you have things like self-doubt or an issue where you're not able to make a commitment on a shot, or you're relying on others, as you said, to make decisions for you, as opposed to doing it yourself, then there's a whole myriad of things. And until that area really gets worked on, it's very difficult to overcome some of the other issues that you may be faced with in any given round.
That's absolutely for sure. So the champion scored a 7 to 8 on the scale, demonstrating extreme tendencies towards self-sufficiency. Some of these players were originally drawn to golf partially because of their strong ability and desire to make and commit to their own decisions. Other champions were drawn to the game without these abilities, but developed them through effort and continual exposure to the decision-making requirements of this highly individualized game. However, they attained their self-sufficiency. Champions use this trait on every hole of every round of golf they play. The golfer who has difficulty making and committing to decisions on the course will not achieve champion status, regardless of how well the physical skills you have developed. If you can't do this on your own, you've got to lower your expectations and your goals.
Yeah, and here's really the great news, Cindy, and just by really looking through the paragraph that you just read out, some players and some especially again we're talking about some of the stronger players on tour and that come with that ability already. Others sort of develop it along the way. So the good news is you may not have necessarily this strong skill set to begin with, but you can learn it. You can develop it over time with the proper guidance and the proper conditioning, if you will. You can develop it. So just because you may not have that strong skill set right now doesn't mean you can't develop it over time. And golf is a game of life for life. It's not something that you're going to learn and master, if you will, overnight. It's something that every player, regardless of what level they may be at, it's a lifelong journey, if you will, and you're always finding ways to improve and to become a better player. So just because you may lack in a certain area right now doesn't mean that you can't become better at that with the proper help and assistance, as I've indicated. So that's something that people need to keep in mind. Don't just say to yourself, well, geez, I'm not very good at this or I'm not very good at that, and so I guess I'm not going to be a better player. Not the case. Everybody has the ability. It's just whether or not you have the will and determination to see it through.
Absolutely. And if you're willing to truly look in the mirror and become aware of what your weaknesses might be. So here's some recommendation. Organize quality practice. Evaluate your rounds to determine if a weakness or lack of confidence in any part of your game kept you from either making good decisions or committing to your decisions. What is your fear? If so, structure your practice to strengthen and build confidence in those areas. Mentally rehearse playing difficult holes to firm up decisions and commitment prior to competition. If there's certain holes, which we've discussed this before, go find a different way to play a hard hole that you always screw up. Change, absolutely play it opposite. Maybe you don't tee off with your driver. Maybe you stand on a different side of the tee box. Just change it up with your brain.
Yeah, you made a great point earlier on when you talked about at the Masters, playing the par 5. If using your driver, you're going to hit it OB, step back and hit 5-iron, maybe 5-iron and a wedge. That's a different way to play it. And a lot of people would, instead of doing the latter, would do the first, and that's why they end up getting themselves in trouble. So that's a really great tip to give the player out there. Is if traditionally you're going to pull out that driver and you always end up with the same result, either OB or you're in a bad situation, reassess that hole and say, okay, instead of taking my driver, maybe I'm going to use a hybrid or I'm going to use a 5-iron or something along that line and get it in the fairway and put it in play. So that's a great tip, Cindy, that you've just given the listeners out there.
Well, good. Second recommendation is a mental routine. Keep in mind, and I must tell you that every one of our traits, one of the recommendations is a mental routine. Keep in mind that full commitment to the wrong club is much better than a lack of commitment to the right club. Emphasize the first step of your mental routine, taking effort to fully commit to a club, a target, and a type of shot before visualizing your shot and feeling your swing. So, and this is a weakness, I just ding, 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 Cindy, did you hear this? So stop. I am so quick to make, decisions and play fast. Take 20 seconds more, 10 seconds, 5 seconds. Inspect the options. How do I best play this shot? Ask yourself that question. How do I best play this shot? What are my options? I could do this or I could do this. Which way can I pull this off with a greater than 50% chance? Then make the decision. And that will help instantly.
Yeah, what really I think a lot of amateurs need to understand too is, Cindy, is this. The more that you do exactly what you just described, the more the more routine it becomes. The more you're able to visualize the shot and prepare for the shot properly, whether you need to take an extra 5 to 20 seconds to do that, is going to help you. And that's what the better players, that's the advantage really that the better players have. I mean, I've seen a lot of great amateur ball strikers that can hit the ball unbelievably and just as good as some of the tour players. But what they don't have is the ability to put it all together. And the tour players, what they do is they're able to do what you've just described on a consistent basis. They're able to do that, and it's very quickly, and it looks very effortless on their part, but it's taken them time to do that. And if the average player out there, the amateur player out there, is willing to invest a little time to do the same thing, before long, you're going to be able to step up there, and it's going to seem very effortless putting this together. And, that's really what we're talking about here, is to develop that mental routine to a point where you're able to just walk up to the ball and you're going to know each and every time what it is that you need to do. And you're not going to be thinking about all the trouble that may be out there. You're going to be able to do it, and you're going to be able to execute those shots with much more confidence.
Absolutely. The third recommendation is course management. Use your practice rounds to make as many decisions as possible regarding club, target, and types of shots you use during the competition. During competition, resist altering this plan for anything except changing conditions, which would be weather.
Right.
And that, again, I keep all my yardage books from all my tournaments, and we had a little bit of a flood in the basement, and I went to find my French lip yardage book, and it was all yucked up. And so I've got to get a new yardage book, and I've got to make new notes, because once you've been somewhere once, it took me a while to learn that lesson. Alan told me, because he had a box when we first started going out, and I said, "What's this box?" And he goes, "It's all my yardage books." I'm like, "Wow, what a great idea! You keep them, you keep all the notes, and then if there's new sprinkler heads, you just make notes of the new sprinkler heads. And once you've been there,
right,
your imagery, you're going to know what you're doing. And for our listeners who maybe play the same golf course all the time, you should know exactly what your plan is and how you best play each hole."
Right.
The next one is caddy assistance. If you use caddies in competition, good communication is necessary to ensure that they'll provide you quality information. If you have a competent caddy who understands your game and the course, let them know you expect him or her to be mentally involved with the round and prepared to offer information or suggestions. Only when you ask for it. If necessary, ask them to support rather than second-guess your decisions when in a disagreement. And this is a big deal. I don't like playing with caddies, and Alan caddies for me most times now, and we've got a pretty good system. I won't say a word unless I have doubts, and then I'll ask his opinion. And he'll say now to me, "You good? Are you good?" And I'll say, "Yeah, I'm good." That means don't talk to me. Because when you have a high score of self-sufficiency, you've probably got a pretty good idea. Again, I would fall in the competitive control freak quadrant, And so did my son. And it's funny because I asked him the other day when we went to watch him, I said, do you want me to caddy for you? And he goes, absolutely not. And sometimes somebody might be offended by that, but I knew exactly what he meant. He didn't want another voice in his head.
Right.
Because he's very self-sufficient. And so I don't like having caddies because I don't want you to chirp something in to distract my thoughts. And it's funny that we play a Legends Tour event in Phoenix, and a friend caddies for me. And this guy is great because he keeps up, shuts up, and puts up, and he just shuts up. And sometimes I will, in fact, the note here, if you want him to be mentally involved with the round, you got to warn him. So I asked him a question on a hole this year, and he looked at me like, what? Like, where are we? And so I was like, wow, I was telling this guy to not be mentally involved in the round, and I just totally caught him off guard, because he wasn't mentally involved in the round, because I had not asked him. And when I did ask him, I shocked him. So.
Yeah. Well, and the key word really is support, and that's really what if you look at some of the better caddies and not to say the other caddies aren't good, but the truly top caddies that stand out on the tours are the ones that are there as a support system. That's what they're there for, to offer reassurance and things like that. But they're also there not to necessarily inject their thoughts and opinions unless asked, but they're there really to just sort of reaffirm and reassure, and sometimes just to be that silent person in the background that knows when not to step in. Because there's nothing worse, like you said, and as you've indicated, Alan, when he's helped you out as caddying, he knows when to sort of step in and when not to, and he knows that when you ask him for his input, that's when he can engage, and otherwise he just holds the bag, so to speak.
Absolutely, just support. I know you're there if I need you.
Yep, exactly.
But realize that I'm the one that's holding the club, and I need to be able to make decisions, because here's the other. He doesn't want me blaming him for a decision. And I need to be strong enough and more self-sufficient to say, I made this decision, this is my fault, and you got to take the heat for it. You're the one that's swinging the club. That's a beautiful thing about golf, and that's why this is so important to me. Number one, I have to learn to own my game and be personally accountable that I'm the only one holding the club, and that's where I love to impart the knowledge and the wisdom to our listeners and my students to say, guess what? You're the one swinging it, not me. So anyway, and that would be coming down to the last one, instruction, guard against a slight tendency to resist all advice from those sincerely trying to help you develop your game. Very often, golfers get more advice than they actually want. Bing, 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 bing. It is important to screen all advice carefully. Inspect the source. Carefully selecting consistent and relevant information. Once you've developed your fundamentals, try to find one qualified person who understands your game and learning style to help keep you on track. Big.
That's a big one, and that's something too that not just on the player side, but even on the instructor side, that we have to remember. It's great to want to be able to help and give advice, but you have to almost have a filtering system as well, as a player, because everybody wants. I mean, and not to belabor a point, but it always interests me when I see, on television that, when I watch some of the media personalities, they want to get into a player's head, and obviously one of the ones in the forefront, of course, is Tiger Woods, and everybody wants to get in his head and tell him what he should and shouldn't do. But and some of it, I'm sure, is great advice, but Tiger's at such a level now that really he understands a lot of these things, and he's got somebody there that is his sort of eyes and ears when needed. But I'm sure Sean Foley knows that, Tiger understands his game well enough that he doesn't have to sit and reinvent the wheel. And he knows how to work with Tiger and as the other coaches did before them. But that's something that's very important as well for instruction. I agree wholeheartedly.
And the other thing is when I had a student of mine come to hit balls the other day, and I was teaching, a few stations over, and she really did good, like the other day. The day before, she's like, "Oh, I got to come back. That felt so good the other day, and I was doing it so well, and we're really making a breakthrough." And I said, "Absolutely." And so she's hitting balls, and there was this older gentleman next to her, and I all of a sudden I noticed that he was commenting on every single swing she took. And I was busy teaching, so I couldn't say anything, but I was looking over at every single swing, and I thought, is he her friend? And does she know him? Did she meet him here? Is she going to go have dinner with him? What? So finally the guy left, and she came over to me, and she goes, "Oh, my God, I was in committee hell." And so I have this thing, that the committee of they are always trying to help you. And she's like, "Wow, I just got to sit here for a minute." And so, again, she's a real nice person, so she didn't say, "Look, I really appreciate you trying to help me, but I've been investing a lot of time and money and taking a lot of lessons and working on my game, and I really would like to be the only one in my head right now."
Right.
And that's kind of a nice, snarty way to say, "Shut up."
Yeah, that's true. People have to understand that, sometimes your help, and I'm not talking about the teacher professionals, but those around, friends and playing partners and things like that. When advice is solicited, that's one thing, but when it's not, sometimes it's better just to stay silent and because the player needs to work on what they need to work on, and if they've got too many voices, chirping in their mind, it just makes it confusing and very difficult and frustrating. And sometimes we just need to take a step back and just let that person work with the individual that they're dealing with and let them help them with the areas they need. And if that's not working, then they can find somebody else. But we need to sometimes, as you said, shut up and let them, work it out themselves.
Yeah, it's funny because, again, sometimes I'm going to use our son as an example. He was playing in a college tournament at TPC at Jacksonville. Sawgrass Country Club a long time ago, and he started to have struggles hitting the ball. And Alan, it kills you to watch it play. It kills you to watch anybody play that you care about, right? Because you can't do anything about it. And Alan, and the poor kid just kept making bad swing after bad swing. And Alan walked up to me and goes, "Sometimes you just have to let them die alone."
Yeah.
And I thought, wow.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just got to let them die alone. And when you let them die alone, that's when they're going to learn the lesson.
Yeah.
And or
I don't know how.
It's so bad that they choose to improve on their own.
Yeah, I can't begin to tell you how many times I'm sure you've experienced the same thing over the years. But you'll be working with a young student, and of course their parents are there, and their parents will try to give the appearance that they're sort of staying out of it, but they'll be just sort of the sidelines, and every once in a while they'll be throwing in a comment or something, and it's not only very difficult for the student, but it's also very distracting for the coach or the teacher, because you're trying to really give your focus, but at the same time, to your student, but at the same time you're tempted to pull out a 9-iron and go over and beat the parent over the head with it, just to get them to be quiet and stay out of it. And so a lot of times what I try to do is if I get a student that's coming in and their parent wants to be there, I'll say, "Look, there's a nice comfortable chair way back there. You can watch and see everything that's going on if you wish, or if it's depending on where they are, there might be a vantage point from the snack bar or something, but I don't like them out on the range with a student, because it's just too much of a distraction. It also makes a student, depending on their level of play, just too nervous and uncomfortable. So this way, we can focus together on the tasks at hand. But great series. I've really enjoyed this. I learn a lot out of this as well as I know you do, Cindy, going through this. And I just think it's, I feel very blessed and honored that you've brought this to the show, and I know that the listeners are going to learn from it as well. And that's the great thing about this game, isn't it, that you're always learning something new as you go along.
It sure is. It sure is. As long as you stay humble and teachable, you can always get better, no matter how good or bad you are, and no matter how old you are.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, we're going to have, I believe this particular series, if I'm not mistaken, I think next week is going to be sort of the close. Am I correct? I think we've just got another segment left of this. And it's been an enjoyable one, and I hope those of you that have been tuning in, if you've missed any of it, you can go back through the Women of Golf On Demand section. You just go to the main page at blogtalkradio.com/Women of Golf, and you can just scroll down through the On Demand section. So if there's any episodes or any broadcasts that you've missed, you can go back and listen to them at your leisure and catch up, if you will, or replay it again if there's one that you feel you didn't quite get the first time around. Listen to it again, and hopefully it'll help you. And always stay tuned every Tuesday. And Cindy, we got to wrap it up here, but Cindy and I want to, of course, thank everybody that's tuning into the program each and every week here on the Women of Golf. We look forward to having you join us here every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time here on blogtalkradio.com. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a great week. Cindy, bless you as always. Thank you for bringing the series to us, and good luck at the Tour Championship. I'm going to be rooting for you, and I know you're going to be playing your best but playing your game. I know that. So have a great time, and we'll talk to everybody soon. And thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
All right.